as a piece, it's a kind of science fiction, documentary fiction, sonic fiction, audio essay. It's somewhere in between these formats. And Darien is the name of an area of Panama that Scotland tried to colonize in the late 17th century. And it was a massive disaster, and it almost bankrupted Scotland. And it was almost one of the main reasons that Scotland had to enter into the union with England to form the UK. So after Brexit and the movement of Scottish independence that's going on just now, I thought it was an interesting opposite parallel to what's going on just now, what's going on just now is kind of disintegration, breakup. The UK is separate from Europe, Scotland wants to separate from England, and disintegration, and obviously when this attempt of Scotland to have its own empire, which was a failure, this was a moment of union and coming together. So I thought it was interesting to tell the current story, the contemporary story of Scottish independence as a science fiction story. So Astro Darien is a space colony floating somewhere between the Earth and the Moon. And in the story, England is suffering from some kind of disease, some kind of catastrophe, some kind of social problems, and Scotland decides to escape through a number of spaceports in the north of Scotland. And these spaceports are real. There is a kind of space race going on just now in the Highlands of Scotland to build satellite launch space centres. So that's why it's kind of documentary fiction, because a lot of it is kind of very real things that are going on just now, but refracted through the lens of science fiction. I mean, there's a lot of inputs that went into this, historical inputs from H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, right through to Delia Derbyshire, BBC Radiophonic Workshop pieces, and another one that was kind of related to my book Sonic Warfare from 10 or so years ago, which was called Project Jericho, which was a piece of radio documentary fiction about acoustic weaponry and a fictional division of the US Army that was trying to create a weapon that produced the voice of God. So there's a lot of influence from radio fiction in the piece. There's a few samples from news items, real news items about the actual space race that's going on in the north of Scotland, and then all of the other voices are text-to-speech, Scottish text-to-speech voices. So I just typed in the script and it generated the voices. And in terms of the music and the sound effects, for some of the tracks, I used this software called Sketch Synth. And that allows you to put in diagrams and it generates sound from the diagrams. And the way I used it is I put in a map of Studio 104, of the auditorium and the placement of the speakers, and I put in the map that I was sent from GRM, and that generated this kind of weird wavering noises that's in one of the tracks. And then the rest of it I'm playing with soft synths in a very strange way.
T-Divine scan. Latitude 8 degrees 50 minutes, 1.47 seconds north. Longitude 77 degrees 37 minutes, 32.67 seconds west. Gunn's challenge was to program a virtual exodus to a space habitat trading post. She directs T-Divine to scan back in time. A Caledonian Heart of Darkness. 1698. Setting sail from Leith, stopping at Madeira and the West Indies. 5 ships launched the Darien scheme, a soon-to-be unsuccessful attempt to establish a Scottish colony on the isthmus of Panama and the Gulf of Darien. A year later, More ships depart the Clyde. The scheme was proposed by William Patterson, slave trader and co-founder of the Bank of England.
The advancement of overseas trade. That is what will save Scotland from its present miserable condition. Darien can become the emporium for the treasures of half the world. It must have colonies of its own. It's not conquest that I have in mind. It is trade. Trade, the great civilizing force of the future. Every voyage is hard. I know that. I've sailed half around the globe in my time, seen storms and shipwrecks, looked starvation in the face, smelt the stench of death below decks, watched men die, watched many men die. So it is on every voyage. And yet, this voyage is different. It's full of dangers. I never said otherwise. But think what awaits us.
It was resisted by King William, who was more interested in protecting English imperial interests.
The shareholders of the East India Company are unhappy. A Scottish trading empire in the Americas, it does not bear thinking about. We had better make sure these northern savages do not prosper.
Daring was an ill-fated bid to cash in on empire and capitalise on oceanic trade between the Atlantic and Pacific. As the Company of Scotland was backed by approximately 20% of all the money circulating, its failure left the entire lowlands in substantial financial ruin, and contributed to her having to enter into the 1707 Act of Union with England. It was finally abandoned in March 1700 after a siege by Spanish forces, which also blockaded the harbour. It's a swamp, a morass. You couldn't even grow anything there, far less build a fort upon it. They are weakened by disease, made ill by this unrelenting rainfall. Malignant fevers and the flux swept away great numbers. I saw with my own eyes and heard with my own ears the last tormented moments of wretched sinners as they prepared to enter through the gates of hell. You did not tell us about the mangrove swamps, or the disease, or the heat and the humidity. Men are dying of the fever every day. There is despair.